afternoon, everyone. This is Alex Yakulis, and Rodney and I are glad that you've joined us today. So thank you for that. For those of you that have not met me, I've been in the industry, had the pleasure to be in our industry, CPG industry, for over 40 years, working with a variety of CPG and headquarter sales agencies. In 2018, I founded the Retail 360 Group and have been providing advisory services to the industry ever since. When you think about why we invited you to our webinar, communication today between retailers and suppliers is getting harder, no doubt about it. Buyers are stretched thin, suppliers are juggling nonstop priorities. Sometimes we feel our messages get lost in the noise, whether it's a voicemail, it's a text message, it's an email, etc. Even with all the tools that we have, real connection with merchants, with individuals, heck, even in our lives, seems to be getting harder than it should be. So today, we want to offer a few thoughts that just may help cut through all that for you. How we show up, how we build trust, and how we make conversations really matter is going to be a key focus of our webinar today. And the one thought that I would like to share, or at least a question I'd like to share before I turn it over to Rodney, is asking ourselves, do we truly understand the day in the life of the people that we're meeting with? So if we put ourselves on the other side of the desk, do we truly understand what they're facing, their challenges, etc.? And I think if we keep that in the back of our mind through the next 30 minutes, it'll help us as we try to form new thoughts, new behaviors, etc. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my co-host, Rodney.
Hey, Alex, thank you so much. And good morning or good afternoon to everyone. As Alex mentioned, we're going to spend the next 45 minutes focused on the topic that you saw when you registered, which is cultivating strong merchant-supplier relationships. And so that we can be efficient and respectful of everyone's time, we've put together 10 what we call relationship boosters that we're going to walk you through. And we'll use the first 30 minutes to go through those concepts. And then we've allocated 15 minutes, so at the bottom of the hour, where we're happy to field questions. You can enter those questions in the chat at any time or when we get to the Q&A session. So our goal is to make this very practical, very relevant, and as Alex touched on, we're really blending his experience in CPG and my experiences, lived experiences, leading biz dev for a large B2B vendor as it grew from $100 million to $8 billion in revenue. And both the successes, frankly, and some of the mistakes I made along the way. I now lead workshops for corporations and trade associations on this exact topic, which is building strong business relationships. And we've really tried to blend Alex's real world experiences, my real world experiences, to give you something that you can take note of and more importantly, put to work using your own style in the coming hours, days, months, and into 2026. So with that, Alex, if it's okay, we'll get going.
Let's do it.
Okay, well, we have 10 what we're calling relationship boosters. And Alex and I have spent a little time kind of bantering about this because we both brought our own experiences, our own anecdotes, and we'll just share these in a very conversational approach. Number one, and these are not in any ascending or descending order, is the topic of listening before you speak. And in my own experiences, what I have found is that the natural inclination, particularly when we are meeting with someone, whether it's in person or virtually, it's been tough to set up the meeting. We only have 30 or 45 minutes. We have so much to say, is that we immediately jump into our remarks. We jump into our slides. And what I found repeatedly through the years is that showing restraint and spending the first 5 or 10 minutes listening is so much more important for a few reasons. It gives the person or people you're with a chance to share what's on their mind. It gives them a chance to feel as though they are a part of the conversation as opposed to just being on the receiving end. And on more occasions than I can recall, I find that I learn something in that first or 5, 10 minutes when they're chatting that will set the table for how to use the remaining time. Now, you have to start it with a question or two to kind of open up the conversation. Alex, I know you've had lots of experience in this as well.
That's good. And I think one other point I'd like to make is that, in looking at all the folks that had registered for our webinar, I imagine there's some that are relatively new in our industry and there are some are more experienced. And, these may be just friendly reminders as we go through these relationship boosters, things that but maybe you're not putting into practice today. And if you think about a day in our lives, we may only get to see our merchant 2 or 3 times a year. And when I say get to see, that might even include being on a virtual call or maybe even having a communication on email. So that opens up its own challenge. So between those meetings with the merchant, a lot of things might have changed in their work life. For instance, their priorities might have changed since the last time you talked to them. The pressures that they have against category growth, the strategies that they're working on. So I would say a quick check-in at the beginning of a meeting, and I know that some meetings could be 30 minutes and every minute matters, but I can tell you an investment in checking in can help reshape that entire meeting. And now the unintended consequence of that is sometimes you might have to call an audible based on what you learned after you ask that question. But we're all going to be prepared to do that. So, and I believe after my years of experience, merchants open up when they feel where we're there to help them solve problems, not push our product. So, Rodney, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so we're going to hit number two here, which is curiosity unlocks understanding. And the best way I have found to describe this simple concept is what I open many of my workshops with. We learn with our ears and with our eyes, not our mouths. And that's code for you've got to be curious to ask the questions that unlock the information that will help drive ultimate mutual success. And Alex, I know on this topic, you've had lots of experience with curiosity becoming a treasure chest to where you really need to go.
Yeah, I think if you step back and kind of put our hats on for a minute here in the industry, is how do we shift a meeting from feeling like we're pitching to where we're partnering, with the retailer? I think trying to get over that bridge, pitching to partnering, is something that I'd ask all of you to stop and consider. Curiosity and it turns listening into insight because you may have several points of insight that you are prepared to share with the merchant, but the curiosity of them providing information back to you might give you even better insight to share with them. And then I think it's always uh, important in the back of your mind to always ask yourself, do I know the why? Do I know why? And not always assume that you know what the merchant is trying to get accomplished. And I think that really creates a paradigm shift, and it shows the merchant or anybody that you're talking to in life. This is well beyond what we do in a day of our lives, but it demonstrates that you're there to solve problems, not just to present your items. And with that, you might even get closer to understanding what the merchant's really trying to solve for, which is going to put you in a better light. Rodney?
Yeah, Alex, our relationship booster number three is about relationships requiring care. And there are a lot of ways to think of care: carefree, careless, careful. The way I like to think about it is people might forget what you said. They might forget the slide that you showed. They might forget the stat that you quoted, but they won't forget how you made them feel. And that's really about care. And I'm not talking about being mushy here. I'm just talking about reaching out in a way that during a business presentation, you're able to make sure that the person or people you're chatting with remember how you made them feel about the business or about their work or about how you'll take care of their business.
Yeah, and I would say that merchant relationships don't grow on autopilot. I would find ways, and what's worked for me is find those small, consistent touch points that matter most. Checking in without being asked, I think builds trust. If you come across a study, come across an article, come across something that might shed light into the categories that you're responsible for, I think would help uh, with that relationship. Also, I truly believe, and we've all had friends who are merchants and merchants that came out and started to work on our side of the desk. They remember partners who make their lives easier. And it's just sometimes it's just the little things there.
Um, Alex, number four is about trust. Um, I often use the idea that trust is the anchor tenant in relationships, both on a professional and a personal basis. And in my research on the topic of relationships, I've been particularly informed and impressed with the work out of Northwestern University in Evanston, where they have an institute that focuses on trust, both from a business perspective, but they've also looked at it from an advertising and a marketing perspective. And they've defined trust as really being made up of three key ingredients. And I want to share those because I think they're so integral to how all of us on this webinar today think about building trust. Because to your point, trust is so fundamental. It's the anchor tenant to relationships. The project, the Trust Project is actually what it's called at Northwestern, calls out three things. To earn and sustain trust, you have to demonstrate competency, right? You got to know your stuff. Two is you have to demonstrate integrity, which is that you're honest. And third, an element of benevolence. And that's a very, very big word, benevolence. And when you really break it down, benevolence means that what I'm recommending is in your best interest. And so you've got to find in a merchant supplier relationship solutions that are in fact benevolent. They're good for both parties because if it's just favoring one or the other, we know that that's not sustainable.
Yeah, and I think that, if you really focus on doing the right thing and build the trust, that's a reasonably easy path with anyone in life. But I can tell you, regaining trust lost is something that's sometimes just not able to be done. So I would absolutely measure every move to make sure that we are delivering what we're promising. Accuracy matters. I would say that merchants and even people in our own personal life, transparency helps them support the relationship better. And I would say, continue to work to be viewed as somebody with a predictable behavior. And that predictable behavior is that I can trust this individual. And I think that'll go so long because I can tell you, it's not always perfect in CPG land. Things will go wrong. And I think when you run to those issues versus running away from the issues is another great way to gain trust.
Alex, our number five relationship booster is rethinking goals when we go into an important meeting. And for many years, I've shared with the young people in my organization and in my workshops that the goal of a meeting is not necessarily to get the order or to get the yes or to get the nod. Sure, that would be ideal. But in most circumstances in the CPG world, these are long-term relationships. They start early, but you want them to become long and robust. And so the real goal of a meeting should be a second meeting or a third meeting, meaning a follow-on meeting, because we all know that if this is going to become a meaningful business relationship, it's not going to be one and done. It's going to be the first of many, whether that follow-on is to work through the specs, work through the delivery, to work through a promotion, or to do a QBR and plan for the next year, the next quarter. So I go into these meetings thinking, yes, I have certain content that I want to cover, certain areas that I'm looking for consensus, but really there needs to be motivation on the part of the merchant that we're going to have a follow-on meeting.
Yeah, and I think the second meeting really hinges on going in that first meeting and showing that you have become a good student of their business. You understand their category, you understand the drivers in the category, you understand the drivers in the aisle in which that category sits, and more importantly, that you understand their shoppers coming into the store. All that, I think, puts you in that preferred status as a supplier to gain that second meeting.
Our number six is the power of storytelling. And this is one that I know we all say, oh, it's so obvious, but it actually takes a lot of work because converting complicated formulas, converting new product introductions, converting discussions of packaging, all those things, it's more natural. It's easier to just put it into a PowerPoint and put it up as facts. But the reality is that we all learn through storytelling. And as I mentioned before, we all remember stories. And so converting facts and figures into stories in a way that doesn't seem patronizing or doesn't seem sophomoric is so powerful for conveying your message.
Yeah, and I would say let's go back to put ourselves in the day of a life of a merchant, where they're meeting after meeting after meeting, and they're either listening or they're being showed slides. And I got to tell you, that's tough. That's difficult. And I think we can all cut through that clutter if we can help the merchant visualize their shopper and the why to the insight that you're bringing. I just think storytelling helps to connect dots. Because I can promise you that I know from my experience when I sit in front of a 20 slide presentation, I don't remember all the data points, but I do remember a story or two that was sold or told to me during the meeting. So I would say, find a way to turn that complex message into a story and make your ideas more memorable and actionable for the merchant.
Um, Alex, as you know from when we were preparing for this webinar, there's a fair amount of research that has emerged in the business community on relationships because particularly in an era of AI, where there's so much thought, oh, we're going to be able to save money and reduce headcount and focus on computers doing all the work. We know, in fact, that relationships are even more important because they are the way you distinguish yourself. And in that context, there's a great book that came out 2 years ago by a guy by the name of Charles Duhigg. It's called Super Communicators. I encourage those of you who are into this topic to pick up a copy or go enjoy it on your Kindle. In the book, Duhigg points out that we as humans really have three dimensions or three types of conversations. And I want to share those with you because I think it helps us think about what kind of conversation do I want to have with my merchant? What kind of conversation does the merchant want to have with me? The three types identified in the book are practical conversations, that's pretty obvious, emotional conversations, and social conversations. And in this webinar, we won't have a chance to delve into all of them. I do it in my workshop. But the key message is to understand where you are in a conversation because a good conversation often jumps through two or three of those in the same 5 or 10 minute conversation or series of sentences. And recognizing where your merchant is when they're communicating, emotional, practical, or social, really helps guide where you're going.
Yeah, and I think I'll layer on another top of dimensions, Rodney, and that's the dimension of voicemail, text messaging, emails, etc. And when some go unanswered, or you send a second request, or you send a text that you sent an email, there's a lot of dimensions taking place. But on the dimensions of conversations, if I could kind of filter it through our CPG lens, the practical, the first one, is the data. It's the message that we're sending in that meeting. The emotional, quite frankly, could be the pressure that you're facing to make a number, gain new distribution, and the pressure the merchant's facing with limited space, with category growth requirements, et cetera. And social is a lot about what we've been talking about thus far, and that is the human connection to help number one and number two, kind of put a bow around both of those.
Showing up matters the most. And what this really gets at is that um, there's table stakes in business. Table stakes is that you provide the data, you provide the pricing, you provide the spreadsheet, you meet the schedule. Showing up is when there are problems or when someone's dealing with something on a personal front and just needs a nice message, or going above and beyond, or going in an area that is unexpected. And Alex, you had some great anecdotes. I know we were chatting before about how there are so many interesting ways to demonstrate that you really are showing up.
Right. And I guess we all work for different companies and represent different brands. But many times the merchant's measuring your own personal brand. That's how you're showing up as yourself. And ask yourself, if your merchants were asked, fill in your name, does the person run and hide, or do they show up when there's an issue and help me solve it? And because we want to get to a point where we are viewed as reliable. So, that starts off with just being consistent in hard moments. That builds that brand equity, your own personal brand equity that you're looking for. Because if you think about a day in our life and a day in the merchant's life, between supply chain and resets and execution, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to test your reliability in the marketplace. Recognize them, however, when you'll be tested, because I know that merchants will tell us that they remember the partners who stay engaged when the other ones disappear. So, again, it's pretty intuitive, but just be reliable.
Self-awareness drives adaptability. Now, sometimes people say to me, "What are you talking about?" And this gets at the importance of recognizing how you're doing in a presentation, in a meeting, whether you're having a conversation over a beer or over a projector. And I find that self-awareness allows me to get better. And more importantly, it allows me to mesh better with the merchant. I do this a few different ways. If I'm in a meeting or on a Zoom or Teams with colleagues, I ask them before and after to give me some feedback, pay special attention. Was I listening? Was I looking at someone in the eye? Was I responding to their questions on point? You can also sometimes via a Zoom like this have it record and then go look at it later. And as your relationship builds with your merchant, ask them for feedback directly because this is not a constant or a static situation. The needs, the business, the pressures, the priorities change, and self awareness allows us to adapt to the circumstance.
Yeah, I know one time I was told, Alex, it's not what you do, it's how you do what you do. And I had to take a moment of pause when I had first heard that. But the essence of it is learn how they want to be served. Everybody's different. We all have our own unique ways we want to be served. And what does that mean? Well, some merchants might want you just to give them quick bullet points. Some may want deeper detail in slides. And then, think about this for a second. We do this in our personal lives. Let's adjust our tone, adjust our pace, and the depth of what we're talking about to match their style. Okay. That way we appear on even grounds. And I think we all would agree to this, that merchants notice when you make their job easier. So finding a way to work within their process to give them a little bit more time back during the day, I think will help your own personal brand as well.
Our final relationship booster today is a phrase you've heard a long time, which is that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Let me say that again. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Sometimes you, in some states, have advertising for the lottery, and the expression there is you can't win if you don't play. Well, in the context of building stronger relationships, how much you prepare is going to feed into the opportunity. I typically find that at a minimum, it's a 2-to-1 ratio, but for important meetings, it's a 5-to-1 ratio, meaning that if the meeting is going to be 30 minutes, I'm often spending 2.5 hours pulling together the materials, doing research, checking the web for both that company, public filings, trying to get a feel for the person or the people I'm going to be meeting with so that I walk in not appearing slick, not appearing rehearsed, very calm and very relaxed, but very knowledgeable so that my preparation allows me to successfully seize the opportunity.
Yeah, and what I've learned is preparation goes well beyond anything you may talk about during the meeting. Preparations mean being prepared to answer questions in those surprise moments. And I had a retailer at a Dan Mack Elevation Forum a couple months ago, said, you know, those 30 slides that your marketing department sends you? The idea is not to bring those 30 slides in and show me. The idea is to take those 30 slides and boil it down into a couple bullet points that I can understand. And I think, what looks like luck, to Rodney's point, is usually just really, really good preparations and being able to take insights and bring in a clear point of view on what the insights are saying.
Alex, we're at the bottom of the hour, and we had said that this first webinar was going to be focused on 10 relationship boosters, and then we'll take some questions from all the folks who are joining via the web. You can just add them to the chat. It can be anything. We're certainly open to talking about these 10 or other questions. A few have come in before we even got started, so maybe we'll kick off one. Alex, do you see it there?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, how do you rebuild trust with a merchant if something's gone wrong, a miss, a delay, or an execution issue? And based on what we just talked about, how I would answer that question is just be there and take ownership, right? And ask the merchant, well, first off, if an apology is necessary, let's make an apology. But you got to remember now, we got a very complex industry. Things are going to go wrong. But I would just say own it and then try to bring resolution. And more importantly, where I think people get lost sometimes is they're doing all this work to fix something, but they don't necessarily report back and keep the folks updated that are the business owners of that. So I would say over communicate when you're trying to put out a fire.
Um, Here's a question, and I'm going to kind of expand upon its core, which is building relationships in a digital environment. Perhaps you've met a merchant or another stakeholder once or twice at a trade show, maybe even a meeting in the office, but you increasingly are finding that the relationship has to be sustained digitally. Virtual at least gives you a chance to see people and talk to people, but sometimes it's by email and text, and that's arguably challenging. Um, I think there's two key reactions to that question, which is how do you build and or sustain relationships in a digital environment? One is that you have to give people a reason to feel like they need to meet with you in person or virtually, right? So there needs to be enough value add in what they will receive by spending 15 or 30 minutes with you in person or by video, as opposed to it being flat by digital, meaning email or text. The second is that I think we all have to recognize there is a place, a big place for email and text. And I've really focused on trying to make sure that my text and my emails are compelling, they are succinct, and that they stand on their own. Someone can read them, they don't have to spend a lot of time with them, they get the point, and they can process it or reach out if they want more information. Because we are living in a world where, to Alex's point, not only is everyone compressed for time, but we're all using digital tools to get more out of the day and to drive results. Hey, by the way, if you'll send your questions via the chat, I know some folks have raised their hand. It's just going to be easier if you'll send your questions in the chat, and that way we can sort them out as opposed to trying to manage turning on and off microphones. Alex, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were going to comment on the digital question.
No, no, I'm good. I was going to make a comment. Still invite. We have 10 minutes left. If there's any other questions on the top of mind of anyone, we'd love to use the balance of our time to answer them.
Yeah, here's one that I think is very common, which is um, how do you navigate relationships when you have a merchant, but you're interested in expanding the relationship beyond necessarily just the merchant, meaning the merchant's boss or other people in the organization? And I think that's very client specific. Alex, by all means, jump in here because I know that the CPG world has lots of layers.
Yeah, there's lots of layers, and of course, there's politics involved too. And I imagine folks on the call are going to chuckle a little bit when they hear that. Sometimes when you're not necessarily getting exactly what you need from your day-to-day contact, going up and over seems like the right thing to do, but it can also be a suicide mission if it's not perceived by either party, the person you went up and over or your merchant itself. My personal belief is that you almost have to maintain your day-to-day contact. And if you want a conversation to be elevated, then perhaps it needs to be elevated by somebody that you report to, that the merchant reports to. So you kind of keep that, lack of better words, peer-to-peer relationship taking place. I've seen really good intents end up with dead bodies laying around because it wasn't handled correctly.
Yeah. I get a question very frequently in my workshops about dormant relationships, which is a different version of soured relationships. A dormant relationship would be a circumstance where you were working with someone, they moved on to something else, meaning they moved into a different role. Perhaps they moved companies, and then either you have the occasion to get reacquainted or you think that's valuable. And I kind of use the end of the year, so this is very timely as we enter the holiday season, to think through those relationships that I haven't had any reason to have some connection with during the year and find a reason. Because dormant relationships are not bad relationships. Often they're not soured relationships. They're really more relationships that through circumstances have just dissolved a little bit. And I actually use the holiday time to send a text or send an email or maybe even snail mail with a holiday card just to touch base and say, hey, we should reconnect after the holiday, or we should reconnect when we have some downtime late in the holiday period. Because we all want to be remembered, we all want to be a part of the connection. And there's no better time than when you see an article or hear of something that reminds you of someone who you haven't talked to in 6 months or even 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we've exhausted the questions from the group, and hey, we want to thank everybody again for your time. We hope that some of the points that we gave in the relationship boosters created a moment of pause, maybe make you think about how you might approach something in the future. What we'd like to do is have another webinar in the first quarter of 2026 and go just a little bit deeper into these points and introduce a couple other points to the group. So we hope that when you see that after this first one, you'll want to continue the dialogue with us. We do plan on sending everyone the video, I mean, recorded video of this call. You have our contact information that's there. If anybody wants to follow up, anybody has additional questions, and really important, if there was a relationship booster that you think should have been mentioned but wasn't, that works for you, we'd love to have that feedback from you when you receive the video recording. Anything you can do to help us advance the message we want to take out to the industry would be most welcome. Rodney, anything
Yeah,
else?
sounds good. Thanks to everyone who's joined. We appreciate your involvement, and we wish everyone a safe and relaxing Thanksgiving this coming week, and look forward to 2026.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
So long.